communist car sold in Ronald Reagan's America. Americans have voted this car the worst car of the millennium.
Speed has always been the ultimate test of a car's soul. Push the throttle, feel the engine roar, and the road begins to tell you what your car is really made of. But not every car was built to handle that kind of pressure. Some looked fast, sounded confident, and promised thrilling performance, until reality hit at 70 miles an hour. From shaking steering wheels to engines gasping for air, these cars simply couldn't keep up when pushed beyond their comfort zone. Some were victims of poor design, others of cost-cutting, and a few were just ahead of their time, but built with the wrong parts. In this video, we're taking a drive down memory lane to look at 14 cars that couldn't handle high speeds. Vehicles that proved speed isn't just about horsepower, but about balance, engineering, and the courage to stay steady when the road starts to blur. Number 14. Ford Pinto. When you hear Ford Pinto, the first thing that comes to mind is probably its explosive reputation. Literally. But even beyond the fire hazard controversy, the Pinto was a car that struggled with speed in every sense. Built during the early 1970s fuel crisis, Ford designed it to be small, light, and cheap to build. Unfortunately, that combination made it one of the least stable vehicles of its time when pushed beyond city limits. At higher speeds, the Pinto's light frame and narrow wheelbase made it feel twitchy and unpredictable. Drivers reported steering vibrations, excessive wind noise, and a floating sensation once they reached highway speeds. The suspension was too soft, which caused the rear to bounce over bumps, reducing traction and control. Add in the fact that the Pinto was underpowered, with engines producing barely 75 horsepower, and you had a recipe for fear on the freeway. Even small gusts of wind could make the Pinto swerve slightly, forcing drivers to constantly correct their steering. Its low weight also made it highly vulnerable to crosswinds, a terrifying experience for anyone trying to overtake a truck or drive through open plains. Many owners described it as a car that felt fine at 40, but dangerous at 70. Ford's attempt to create a budget-friendly, fuel-efficient car ended up being one of its most notorious missteps. The Pinto's poor structural balance and lack of stability at speed turned it into a rolling cautionary tale. What's worse, the car's lightweight design wasn't paired with strong enough materials to handle the forces of high-speed driving, leading to bending and rattling panels. By the late 1970s, the Pinto's name had become synonymous with unsafe engineering. Ford quietly phased it out, focusing instead on more stable, compact models. But the Pinto remains a reminder that building a fast, safe, and stable car requires more than just cutting weight and boosting mileage. It takes real engineering discipline. Number 13. Chevrolet Vega. The Chevrolet Vega began its life with high hopes and big promises. When it rolled out in the early 1970s, GM promoted it as the future of American compact cars. Stylish, efficient, and capable of handling modern highways. But once drivers actually hit those highways, the Vega's weaknesses became painfully clear. Its aluminum engine was innovative but deeply flawed. At higher speeds, it was prone to overheating and warping, especially under sustained pressure. The car's cooling system simply wasn't strong enough, leading to engine failure if pushed for too long. Combine that with poor build quality and cheap materials, and the Vega quickly earned a reputation for being unreliable when driven fast. Even when the engine held up, The Vega's handling was nothing to brag about. Its suspension setup was too soft for high-speed stability. On smooth city roads, it felt fine, but on highways or long stretches of open road, it became bouncy and unsettled. Drivers complained of steering that felt vague, almost disconnected, when traveling above 60 miles per hour. Every lane change or cornering maneuver felt like a gamble. The car's lightweight construction, while great for fuel economy, made it easily susceptible to crosswinds and uneven pavement. And with a body prone to rusting, some Vegas literally began falling apart within a few years. The higher the speed, the louder the rattles became, as if the car itself was protesting every mile per hour over 70. Perhaps the most ironic part is that Chevrolet marketed the Vega as sporty and modern, a compact that could compete with the likes of European imports. But in real-world driving, it didn't even come close. Instead, it became another example of early 70s cost-cutting gone wrong. By the time the Vega was discontinued, it had gone from a symbol of progress to a symbol of how not to design a car. It may have looked sleek in the driveway, but once you hit the gas, the Vega revealed its true nature: a car that couldn't handle speed, heat, or time. Number 12. Yugo GV. If there was ever a car that defined cheap but terrifying, it was the Yugo GV. Imported from Yugoslavia in the 1980s, it promised Americans a brand new car for under $4,000. A deal that sounded too good to be true. And as it turned out, it was. At low speeds around town, the Yugo was manageable. But the moment it hit the highway, everything began to fall apart, literally and figuratively. Its tiny 1.1-liter engine struggled to maintain highway speeds, often maxing out at around 65 miles per hour with a desperate whine. Drivers who dared to go faster reported that the steering wheel began to shake violently. The car vibrated like an unbalanced washing machine, and the entire body seemed to lose composure. The Yugo's aerodynamics were almost non-existent. It was shaped like a box, catching wind from every direction. Even mild breezes could push it around, forcing drivers to grip the wheel tight, just to stay in their lane. And because it was built with thin, low-quality metal, the body panels rattled and flexed at high speeds, making the experience nerve-wracking. The suspension, meanwhile, was far too basic for highway driving. Every bump sent shock waves through the cabin. The tires were narrow, offering little grip or stability during sudden turns or lane changes. It wasn't uncommon for the Yugo to feel like it might lift off the ground on long, open stretches. To make things worse, the car's braking system was underpowered, meaning slowing down from high speeds was almost as dangerous as getting there in the first place. In real-world driving, the Yugo simply wasn't built for America's fast, open highways. It was a city car at best, and a rolling hazard at worst. Over the years, it's become a punchline in automotive history, a reminder that sometimes low price comes with a high cost. And when it came to handling high speeds, the Yugo GV was as out of its depth as any car could possibly be. Number 11. AMC Gremlin. The AMC Gremlin was one of the strangest cars of the 1970s. Part muscle car, part compact, and entirely confusing in its design. When it first hit the market in 1970, AMC tried to position it as a fun, affordable alternative to the bigger cars of the era. But while it had quirky charm and a decent engine lineup, the Gremlin's performance at high speeds was far from reassuring. The main culprit was its short wheelbase. The Gremlin was essentially a chopped-down AMC Hornet, which meant its proportions were odd: short, stubby, and tail-heavy. That imbalance became a real problem at highway speeds. The car tended to wander, sway, and feel unstable when pushed past 65 miles per hour. Crosswinds could easily send it drifting within the lane, and drivers often described it as nervous on the road. Its suspension didn't help matters. The front end had a tendency to lift slightly at higher speeds, reducing steering precision. Meanwhile, the rear could bounce and wiggle over rough surfaces, making the whole experience unpredictable. For many drivers, it felt like the Gremlin couldn't decide whether it wanted to be a city car or a highway cruiser, and ended up being neither. Even though the Gremlin came with optional 6-cylinder and V8 engines that offered decent power, the chassis and handling simply weren't built to match that output. Floor it, and the rear tires would easily lose grip. Corner too quickly, and the car leaned heavily, giving passengers the uneasy sense that it might tip over. By modern standards, the Gremlin's flaws might seem comical, but at the time, they were frustrating and even dangerous. It was a car that looked bold and fun in advertisements, yet turned into a handful on the open road. While it developed a cult following later for its oddball charm, the truth remains. At high speeds, the AMC Gremlin was a jittery, unstable ride that simply wasn't built to handle modern highways. Number 10. Suzuki Samurai. The Suzuki Samurai was marketed as a rugged little off-roader when it arrived in the US during the 1980s. And in fairness, that's exactly what it was good at: crawling over rocks, mud, and trails. But the moment you took it out of its natural habitat and onto the highway, things got scary fast. The Samurai's biggest weakness was its high center of gravity, combined with its narrow track. That setup made it incredibly prone to body roll and even rollover accidents at higher speeds. Consumer Reports famously tested the Samurai and found that it could tip over during sharp turns, even at moderate speeds. Suzuki disputed those findings, but real-world drivers knew the truth. The Samurai was not a car you wanted to drive fast. At 65 to 70 miles per hour, the steering felt vague and overly sensitive. Small corrections could send the car weaving from side to side. Its boxy, upright design also made it highly vulnerable to crosswinds, especially when passing large trucks. On windy days, the car felt like it was constantly fighting to stay straight. The short wheelbase and light body added to the problem. Any bump or dip in the road could unsettle the vehicle, forcing the driver to constantly adjust. The suspension, designed for off-roading flexibility, was far too soft for high-speed stability. Combine that with its underpowered 1.3-liter engine, which strained just to keep up with traffic. And it's easy to see why highway driving in a Samurai was a white-knuckle experience. Despite all this, the Samurai gained a loyal fan base among off-road enthusiasts who appreciated its simplicity and toughness. But no matter how much love it earned on the trails, one fact remained unshakable. The Suzuki Samurai simply wasn't made for speed. On the highway, it was more survival than driving. Number 9. Smart Fortwo. The Smart Fortwo was designed for city life, short trips, tight parking, and urban convenience. But the moment you took it outside that comfort zone and onto the highway, it became one of the most unnerving driving experiences ever sold. At its core, the Smart Fortwo was a marvel of compact engineering. Just over 8 feet long and weighing barely 1,800 pounds, It was incredibly efficient in tight spaces, but that same lightweight, tiny design turned into a liability at higher speeds. The car's short wheelbase and tall, narrow body meant it had almost no aerodynamic stability. Once you hit 65 miles per hour, it felt like the car was being bullied by the wind. Even the slightest cross breeze could push it sideways, forcing constant steering corrections. Inside, the cabin amplified that sense of instability. Drivers reported feeling like they were sitting on the car rather than in it, with the steering wheel vibrating and the suspension transmitting every bump straight through the seat. The Fortwo's incredibly short front and rear overhangs made it feel twitchy, especially when overtaking or being overtaken by larger vehicles. When a semi-truck passed by, it could literally rock the car with air pressure. Then there was the transmission, a jerky, semi-automatic gearbox that made acceleration feel unpredictable. When you tried to merge onto a highway, the lag between shifts made it difficult to control power delivery smoothly. Combine that with the car's 3-cylinder engine producing just around 70 horsepower, and you had a car that struggled not only to reach highway speeds, but to stay composed once it got there. While city dwellers loved its efficiency and parking ease, highway commuters quickly learned that the Smart Fortwo was not built for long-distance travel. It wasn't just slow, it felt nervous, light, and unsafe above 65 miles per hour. In essence, it was the perfect city car trapped in a world of big highways and even bigger vehicles. Cute and clever? Absolutely. Built for high-speed confidence? Not even close. Number 8. Geo Metro. The Geo Metro was the king of fuel economy in the 1990s. A tiny, lightweight commuter car that promised more than 40 miles per gallon. But what it saved in gas, it completely lost in stability and speed. Powered by a 3-cylinder engine that produced barely 55 horsepower, the Metro was never meant to go fast. Hitting 70 miles per hour felt like an accomplishment, but it came with serious consequences. The entire car began to shake. The steering wheel buzzed in your hands, and you could hear every piece of sheet metal vibrate in protest. The Metro was so light that even a modest gust of wind could push it into another lane. Passing large trucks was especially terrifying. The air turbulence alone could throw it off balance. The car's structure didn't help either. With minimal insulation, thin panels, and a suspension tuned purely for comfort, it lacked the rigidity and aerodynamics needed for highway stability. Drivers often described it as floating over the road at higher speeds, with little sense of control. Cornering at speed was out of the question. The tires squealed, the body leaned dramatically, and it felt like the car might tip if pushed too hard. Inside, the story wasn't much better. Road noise was overwhelming, and the small engine had to rev at high RPMs just to maintain highway pace, creating a constant droning sound. Many owners joked that driving a Geo Metro fast felt like wringing its neck. You could almost feel the car begging you to ease off the pedal. Still, for all its faults, the Metro earned affection for being cheap, simple, and economical. It served millions of people well for short commutes and city runs. But take it on an interstate for more than a few miles, and you quickly realize the truth. This was not a car built for speed or long-distance stability. It was a budget-friendly, gas-saving tin can that shook with fear every time the speedometer crossed 65. Number 7. Dodge Neon. When the Dodge Neon debuted in the mid-1990s, it was supposed to be Chrysler's answer to the growing wave of compact imports. With its cheerful, "Hi" advertising campaign, the Neon won over plenty of first-time buyers thanks to its low price, peppy engine, and friendly design. But when it came to holding its own at highway speeds, the Neon showed its limits fast. Around town, the car was zippy and fun. Light steering, quick acceleration, and enough character to make city driving enjoyable. But once you hit 65 or 70 miles per hour, that same playful spirit turned into nervous energy. The Neon's light frame and soft suspension made it prone to wandering and bouncing on uneven pavement. On long drives, drivers often complained that it felt like the car was floating, with little connection between the tires and the road. Wind and road noise were constant companions. The car's minimal insulation meant the cabin filled with a loud hum once you got on the highway. The steering also lacked feedback, so every lane change required extra attention. Even the smallest crosswind could nudge the Neon around, and overtaking trucks felt like driving through a storm. The first-generation models also suffered from build quality issues that became more noticeable at speed. Loose panels, rattling dashboards, and cheap materials made the experience feel shaky and unfinished. And while the Neon's 2.0-liter engine offered decent power, the chassis simply couldn't handle it smoothly at high speeds. The car's aerodynamics were poor, and its short wheelbase made stability an ongoing problem. Enthusiasts who modified the Neon for racing knew how much potential it had. With the right suspension and tires, it could perform well. But in its stock form, it was a commuter car that struggled when pushed too hard. On the highway, the Neon's happy-go-lucky personality disappeared, replaced by constant vibration and vague control. Over time, the Neon became known as a cheap but short-lived option. Fun in the city, forgettable on the freeway. It was one of those cars that reminded drivers of an uncomfortable truth. Being quick off the line doesn't mean being safe or stable when the speedometer climbs. Number 6. Hyundai Excel. The Hyundai Excel arrived in the U.S. in the mid-1980s with a simple pitch: a brand-new car for less than $5,000. It sounded unbelievable, and for many first-time buyers, it was irresistible. But once the excitement faded and the cars hit the highways, the flaws began to show. At low speeds, the Excel did what it was supposed to do: get people from point A to point B cheaply. But take it above 60 miles per hour, and it transformed from an affordable commuter into a white-knuckle adventure. The Excel's body was so lightly built that high-speed vibrations were impossible to ignore. The steering was vague and inconsistent, requiring constant small corrections just to stay straight. The engine, a small four-cylinder, strained hard to keep up with traffic, often running at high RPMs for extended periods. This caused overheating, oil consumption, and, over time, serious mechanical wear. The transmission wasn't much better, often slipping or jerking during acceleration. Together, these problems made long highway drives exhausting and unpredictable. Then there was the suspension: soft, spongy, and completely overwhelmed at speed. The Excel's wheels bounced over bumps, and body roll was dramatic even during gentle turns. It was a car that felt nervous, especially on windy days or uneven highways. And because it lacked proper insulation, the cabin echoed with tire noise, engine buzz, and rattles from every corner. To make matters worse, the car's lightweight build offered almost no protection or stability. Passing trucks created noticeable turbulence, sometimes enough to shift the car slightly within its lane. Many owners joked that the Excel felt like driving a soda can on the highway. Despite all this, the Excel played an important role for Hyundai. It introduced the brand to the American market. But the lessons learned from its flaws paved the way for Hyundai's later success with much better-built models. Still, the Excel remains one of those early economy cars that simply couldn't handle the demands of high-speed driving. Proof that cheap and fast rarely go hand in hand. Number 5. Kia Cephia. Before Kia became known for reliability and style, it had a rough start, and the Cephia was a big part of that story. Introduced in the mid-1990s, the Kia Cephia was meant to be an affordable compact sedan for the average driver. It looked decent, had a simple layout, and came with a tempting price tag. But once it hit the highway, all its flaws came into sharp focus. The Cephia's engine lineup, while adequate for city use, lacked the refinement needed for sustained high-speed driving. The base 1.6-liter and 1.8-liter engines were underpowered, producing just enough to get by. To reach 70 miles per hour, the engine had to work overtime, revving high and producing an unsettling amount of noise and vibration. Drivers often reported that after long highway trips, their hands felt numb from the constant buzz of the steering wheel. Stability was another major problem. The Cephia's lightweight build and soft suspension made it feel floaty and disconnected on freeways. At high speeds, the steering became loose and imprecise, forcing drivers to constantly correct their course. Combine that with narrow tires and minimal sound insulation, and the result was a driving experience that felt shaky, loud, and unrefined. Crosswinds and passing trucks only made things worse. The Cephia's body wasn't aerodynamically sound. It caught wind like a sail. In certain conditions, the car literally wobbled within its lane. And when it came to braking from high speeds, the brakes felt soft and faded quickly, further reducing confidence. Kia at that time was still a newcomer in the US market, and its cars were built to a price, not a standard. The Cephia's structural integrity wasn't robust enough for sustained highway use. Over time, many owners complained of rattles, loose trim, and vibrations that worsened with age. While Kia would later reinvent itself with far superior models, the Cephia serves as a reminder of how far the company had to come. It was affordable and functional, but at high speeds, it was a rolling lesson in instability. The Cephia could handle the city, but on the highway, it felt like it was holding on for dear life. Number 4. Pontiac Aztek. Few cars are as instantly recognizable or as infamous as the Pontiac Aztek. Launched in 2001, it became the punchline of automotive design jokes everywhere. But beyond its odd appearance, the Aztek also struggled where it mattered most, on the open road. The Aztek was built on a minivan platform but styled like an SUV, and that mismatch created serious handling problems. Its high, boxy profile gave it poor aerodynamics, while its soft suspension created excessive body roll. At highway speeds, it felt top-heavy and clumsy, especially when changing lanes or taking long, sweeping curves. The higher the speed, the more it leaned, making drivers feel uneasy and disconnected from the road. Under the hood, the Aztek came with a 3.4-liter V6 engine. Powerful enough on paper, but paired with a sluggish transmission and an overweight body. The result was uneven acceleration and constant gear hunting at higher speeds. passing other vehicles required patience, and long drives left the engine humming loudly just to maintain pace. The cabin, though spacious, didn't help matters. Wind noise was loud, and vibrations traveled through the steering column and floorboards. The soft suspension that made city rides comfortable turned the car into a bouncing mess on uneven highways. Even the all-wheel drive version struggled with stability. The handling simply wasn't confidence-inspiring. Reviewers at the time called the Aztek awkward to drive fast, and owners often echoed the same sentiment. While it offered practicality and interesting features, like a built-in cooler and camping setup, it failed to deliver what drivers expected from an SUV: composure and control at highway speeds. Ironically, the Aztek has gained a cult following in recent years, partly thanks to its appearance in Breaking Bad. But no amount of nostalgia can change the truth. It was a car that simply couldn't handle speed with grace. Its unbalanced design and poor handling made it feel like it was always one sharp turn away from trouble. Number 3. Mitsubishi Mirage. The Mitsubishi Mirage has always had one clear goal: deliver maximum fuel efficiency at the lowest possible price. And to its credit, it does that well. But the trade-off for that efficiency is immediately obvious the moment you take it beyond city limits. The Mirage, particularly its recent generations, is one of the most unstable and nerve-wracking cars to drive at high speeds. Its lightweight construction, just over 2,000 pounds, makes it feel more like a go-kart than a highway car. The short wheelbase and tall, narrow stance create a natural tendency for body sway and twitchy handling. Once you reach 65 or 70 miles per hour, even a mild gust of wind can push the Mirage around. Overtaking trucks becomes a white-knuckle experience as the air turbulence shoves the car sideways. The 1.2-liter three-cylinder engine, designed purely for efficiency, has a hard time maintaining highway speeds without constant effort. The CVT transmission keeps the revs high, producing a loud droning sound that fills the cabin. Drivers often describe it as feeling like the engine is screaming for mercy. This constant strain not only makes highway driving uncomfortable, but also exposes how underpowered the Mirage really is when the road opens up. Then there's the suspension. Soft, simple, and designed for city potholes, not freeway curves. The Mirage feels floaty, disconnected, and overly light on its feet. Steering feedback is minimal, and during quick lane changes, it tends to lean alarmingly. Add to that a basic tire setup with limited grip, and it's easy to see why most Mirage owners avoid pushing it past 70. Noise insulation is almost non-existent. Wind, road, and engine sounds combine into a constant roar that makes long-distance driving exhausting. Even though Mitsubishi has tried to improve this over the years, the car's design simply doesn't lend itself to highway composure. While the Mirage remains a smart choice for budget-conscious city dwellers, it's a reminder that affordability often comes with limits. It's efficient, yes, but once the speedometer climbs, it transforms from an economy car into a shaky, wind-tossed experience that tests every driver's nerve. Number 2. Toyota Echo. When Toyota launched the Echo in the early 2000s, it was meant to attract younger buyers looking for a reliable, affordable subcompact. It had Toyota's trademark dependability and excellent fuel economy, but on highways, the Echo was far from reassuring. The biggest issue came from its shape. The Echo's tall, narrow design gave it a top-heavy stance that made it feel unsteady at speed. Despite its light weight, The car sat unusually high off the ground, which meant that at 65 miles per hour and above, even a small crosswind could make it sway. Passing trucks often created such strong air pressure that the Echo wobbled in its lane, forcing drivers to tighten their grip on the wheel. Under the hood, its 1.5-liter engine was efficient, but not powerful enough for effortless highway cruising. Keeping pace with traffic required flooring the gas pedal, which made the engine whine constantly. The lightweight body, while great for city mileage, transmitted every vibration through the cabin. Combine that with thin insulation and narrow tires, and the Echo began to feel overwhelmed on open roads. The suspension setup, tuned for comfort rather than performance, caused excessive body roll during high-speed turns. Steering precision wasn't Toyota's strong suit on this model either. It felt light and vague, giving the driver little confidence when changing lanes or maneuvering quickly. Even though reliability was top-notch, comfort and control were not. The Echo's interior added to the odd experience. The centrally mounted instrument cluster required drivers to glance sideways for speed readings, a small but frustrating design choice that became more noticeable at high speeds when focus mattered most. Despite its flaws, the Echo found success as a dependable, fuel-efficient commuter. But for anyone hoping to take it on long highway trips, it quickly revealed its limits. It wasn't built for performance, composure, or speed. It was built for simplicity and efficiency. And at 70 miles per hour, that simplicity turned into instability. Number 1. Fiat 500. Few cars have as much personality packed into such a small frame as the Fiat 500. When it made its comeback in the late 2000s, it captured hearts with its charming retro styling, Italian flair, and city-friendly size. But once the cute little Fiat hit the highway, that charm faded fast. The Fiat 500 quickly revealed itself as a car that simply wasn't built for speed, or for stability at high speeds. Weighing around 2,300 pounds with a wheelbase shorter than most compact cars, the Fiat 500's design made it nimble in tight spaces, but twitchy and nervous on open highways. Once the speedometer climbed past 65 miles per hour, the car's light body and upright shape worked against it. It was easily unsettled by crosswinds, and every passing truck felt like a shock wave. Even on smooth pavement, the steering became overly sensitive, forcing constant micro-corrections just to keep it centered. The base model's small 1.4-liter engine struggled to maintain high speeds without straining. While the sportier Abarth version offered more power, even that couldn't completely fix the car's high-speed handling issues. The short wheelbase caused the Fiat 500 to bounce and pitch over uneven roads, and the soft suspension transmitted every dip, ripple, and imperfection directly into the cabin. At times, it felt less like driving a car, and more like balancing on top of one. Noise was another big issue. With minimal insulation and thin doors, the sound of wind and road grew deafening the faster you went. Many owners reported that long highway trips left them fatigued, not from the distance, but from the constant vibration and droning engine note. The compact cabin design made this worse, amplifying every sound like an echo chamber. Despite these issues, the Fiat 500 earned a loyal fan base for city use. It's fun, stylish, and surprisingly practical for short commutes. But the same traits that made it great in cities made it a handful on the highway. Too light, too short, and too upright. It simply couldn't find its balance once the speeds climbed. The Fiat 500 may have looked like a tiny rocket ready for fun, but when it came to high-speed stability, it was more of a nervous passenger than a confident driver's car. Not every car was meant to live life in the fast lane. Some were designed for efficiency, simplicity, or budget-friendly commuting. And when those cars faced the demands of high-speed driving, their flaws became painfully clear. From shaky suspensions and underpowered engines to boxy aerodynamics and poor structural balance, these vehicles proved that speed exposes everything. But each one also tells a story of experimentation, ambition, and sometimes failure. They remind us that car design is about compromise. A vehicle that's perfect for crowded city streets may not belong on the interstate, and a car built for comfort might never feel stable at 80 miles per hour. In the end, these 14 cars earned their place in automotive history, not for how fast they went, but for how much they struggled trying. Because when it comes to driving, control is everything. And some cars just couldn't keep up when the road demanded more.